Hello and welcome to another episode of the Classical Republican. I'm on my plane, leaving, well not my plane, but Air France's plane, and this is our last view of La Serenissima. Yeah, it's right out there. And I'm going to be talking about, so we're reading on non-intervention from 1851. Okay, so Mazzini's kind of upset that the British, because they had a non-intervention policy, and that allowed the French and Austrians and Neapolitans to destroy the Roman Republic back in 1849. So he says the principle of non-intervention in the affairs of other nations is the product of the negative and purely critical spirit of the last century. So he's saying it's outdated for the times that he lives in. So he says, so he defines a nation, and so nations, this is where we see that Mazzini is more of a realist. Well, in this, well, he's both, really, both a liberal and a realist in international relations theory. And he says it is between certain things called nations that the principle of non-intervention is to hold. The principle of non-intervention is not to take effect except on the supposition that the parties concerned are distinct nations. Okay, so nations, and he says, but what is a nation? According to any possible definition of this word, a nation is a larger or smaller aggregate of human beings bound together into an organic whole by agreement in a certain number of real particulars, such as ethnicity, language, physiognomy, historical tradition, intellectual peculiarities, or active tendencies. So that's a nation right there. And he goes on to say that countries should not meddle in nations' internal issues, but non-intervention. So when you have nations that are like multinational, and he says non-intervention does not apply when nations are struggling to be free. He goes on to say, but should the government of a neighboring despotic state, either invited by the vanquished party or fearing the contagion of liberal ideas in its own territory, militarily invade the convulsed state and so interrupt or repeal the revolution, then the principle of non-intervention is at an end. Okay. It goes on to say that, but it begins. Okay, so I believe that non-intervention has its place, but only among nations that are, self-determining nations. He says that the doctrine of non-intervention between states and nations is poor and incomplete, but he's trying to work on that there. One interesting side note is that Alexis de Tocqueville was the French Minister of Foreign Affairs at the time the French invaded and destroyed the Roman Republic in 1849. So that's interesting. So in this, he's really showing his favor for realism, but we return to Republican moderation in international relations theory in the end, and I'll read the conclusion. The whole problem is indeed very difficult. Governments are the natural organs and representatives of states in their dealings with other states, and war is in itself a deplorable means for settling international disputes. However, I hope that the world still has something to discover in this regard. I hope that out of all those current plans and proposals which many believe to be premature and utopian, peace congresses, Western committees on progress, European courts of arbitration, and universal industrial exhibitions, a new type of international relations will gradually emerge, the exact character of which we cannot foresee, but which shall be equally distinct from the wretched neutrality on the one hand and from boisterous military activity on the other. This result is not to be arrived at by shutting our eyes and our hearts to what is actually happening around us. Instead, we should allow each case of contemporary international wrong to produce its full impression on us and to stimulate us to some immediate and appropriate course of action. The theory of international politics can be perfected in no other way than by dealing sincerely and thoroughly with individual cases as they successively arise. Okay, so we see that Mazzini is a realist, but also pragmatic, and he's really arguing from a realist perspective in this essay. Until next time, long live the Republic.